Join the coven. I Hunt Reverse Vampires 2. A story written by Cecily 1987. Part 5. Hey guys, it's Taylor again. Spoiler alert, I survive. But I guess you already knew this. Who else is telling you all these things if I'm dead, right? It's been taking me a while to write this because I really don't know how to explain what happened next. I know you're supposed to show, not tell. But some really convoluted extra-dimensional shenanigans ensued after they pulled my half-dead butt out of the graveyard. So I'm about to exposition dump all over the place. But remember, I gathered a lot of this info from multiple sources after I had recovered. I was unconscious for most of this, so this is the best I can make sense of it. After Ma and Celia had saved us, Monroe let down the time spell barrier and collapsed on the ground beside me. Fortunately, her own private army was on its way to help us. I had sacrificed one of my eyes to give Monroe the magic juice she needed to reset the timeline once more, saving all of us. I remember her crawling over to me and cupping her hand over my bleeding eye socket. She told me I was an idiot over and over, but even in my stupor, I could tell she wasn't really that mad. When her posse finally arrived, the graveyard was swarming with heavily armed men in suits. Monroe's daughter and fellow disciples huddled around their madame and began chanting some sort of healing mantra. Monroe told the bulk of them to stop and go help Celia instead. Oh my god, Celia, she was worse off than me. She was thrashing and screaming. Voss later told me she began to age rapidly, and only the prayers from the disciples would revert her back to normal. Voss told me he was the first to notice it, the gray hair in Madame Monroe's hair. I don't know how he brought the subject up with a fierce woman in her early 40s who obviously cares a lot about her appearance. But then Voss noticed the gray hair on Mika, and he knew he had to say something. The angel had cursed us, whether if it was on purpose or just a side effect of being so close to a divine being. We were all aging at a rapid pace, and most of us were half dead anyways. Monroe ordered her people to take us to something she called a Faraday chamber. She said it was the only thing that could save us. It was only 20 minutes away in the basement of one of her mansions. A basement in New Orleans? Yes, you heard right. The room was a magical anomaly. That's not even the strangest thing about it. The way it was explained to me is still confusing, but I'll do my best to explain it for you. The Faraday chamber was a square room with a flat black door. Black walls, black everything. A set of chairs wounded down, at least 3 stories to the solid black room. When the door was open, it looked like the world dropped off into nothingness. The strange material of the walls absorbed all light shone into it. But we were all ushered in quickly anyways. Me and Celia were placed on the cold, smooth ground. I was in and out of consciousness at this point due to blood loss and the angel's curse. Madame Monroe's disciples went to the corner of each wall to begin praying. Soon the entire room was glowing gold with intricate occult symbols, like we were floating in the depths of space, with the stars replaced with golden ancient script. Once it started, and once the door was closed, we were no longer tied to the rules of this universe. The chamber was in its own pocket of reality where life, death, and time were twisted together. Think the hyperbolic time chamber from DBZ, or for non-weebs, a spiritual Schrodinger's box. We were somewhere between life and death, space and time, somewhere and nowhere at all. Madame Monroe said this was the only way to slow down the angel's curse while her disciples tried to magic up a cure. While I was unconscious, her people got to work trying to save all of our lives. I guess I must have been pretty close to kicking the bucket. Mika and Voss tried to play it off later, but I know how bad it was. I had myself a classic out-of-body experience. I found myself sitting by my body. Everything around me was blurry and out of focus. From what I could gather, it was me, Mika, Voss, Celia, Ma, the Madame, and 5 of her people, one being her daughter. The robed disciples were all blurry like a picture out of focus. They would sporadically teleport around the dark cube's interior. Madame Monroe was the worst, flickering around the room so quickly that she appeared to be standing in 2 places at once sometimes. I didn't like looking at any of my fellow hunters for too long either. Their faces would change expressions rapidly, cycling through emotions like channels on a TV. It was super creepy. Celia was something completely different. She was frozen in a scream of terror and pain, laying on her back next to me. A glow of blue light resonated off her, hurting my head to look at. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 1,000 years, maybe a second. But time passed with me not daring to look at anything. I couldn't even look at my physical body laying next to me. The fact that my real body was missing an eye and my spirit form still had both eyes tripped me out too much. They scurry around like ants when their heel is kicked, came a low, female voice. It was a voice I recognized. It was the voice that was in my head when I was in the graveyard. I slowly looked up to be startled by the sight of 2 brilliant red eyes staring back at me. I couldn't help but be entranced and unable to break my gaze away. As I sat hypnotized, the strikingly beautiful face of a woman formed around the floating eyes. A lithe, statuesque woman formed in front of me. At first she was nude, her pale ivory-colored skin standing out brilliantly against the dark surroundings, the golden light of the magical runes reflecting off her softly. As stunning as she was, I refused to run my eyes down her body because I was actually kind of afraid of her. Something in those eyes reminded me of the killers I had faced in the past. So I kept eye contact like any gentleman, but I did notice a large X-shaped scar between her breasts, right over where her heart would be. "Aw, you're here too," the woman said to me. "You must be closer to death than the others. No doubt it has something to do with this strange chamber also." As if an afterthought, dark blood red feathers seemed to appear around her and flatten themselves against her skin to cover every inch of her nude body, even all the way up to her neck. The feather bodysuit only left her hands and face exposed, and hugged so tight that her figure was still very revealing. I swallowed hard, and finally felt comfortable enough to break eye contact without offending the scary feather lady. Only then did I realize her jet black hair fell all the way down her back to brush lightly against the floor. "Thank you for saving my son, brother of Tyler," the woman said, bending down to look at me, and offered me her hand, a sly, almost cruel smirk on her face. "That's the only reason I allow your eyes to linger where they shouldn't." If I could have blushed, I would have. Could she read my mind, or was I that obvious with my lingering eye? Her cold hand felt like polished steel as she took mine and pulled me to my feet. Once I was done being embarrassed, I realized what she had said. "Wait, your son? Wait, Tyler?" I was incredibly surprised and disappointed in what she had to tell me. Surprised to finally have the mystery of Vaz's pentagram tat finally answered, and figure out whose voice was in my head earlier. I was even more disappointed to hear that Tyler had been with her earlier to talk to Mika, but had passed on after the conversation. To know that my brother had been so close and I had only missed him by a couple of hours almost shattered me. I never got to tell him goodbye. My last memories of him were when he was dying and screaming. Seeing him one last time, even as a ghost, would have meant the world to me. I'm sorry, I'm being selfish. The revelation that I had just met Vaus's ghost mom was a little more important. She was sparse on information. The only thing she told me is that she was technically still alive and living within her son. Vaus had her heart in his chest. She told me she wasn't a Mav. She was something else entirely. The only one of my kind in this reality, she said. Her name was Alista Batherez of House Blue Draven. Vaus was her adopted son, turned blood relative when he received her heart. "Enough of your questions now," she said with a cold sternness that left no room to argue. "My aura is hurting because of this strange room. I find it hard to concentrate." I stood staring at her for a while as she raised her hand up to her brow like she was suffering from a migraine. It struck me as odd that she could be having a headache without the existence of a physical head. But I didn't know anything about how spirits worked. Mika would tell me later that self-soothing gestures and common non-verbal body language tended to carry over to be visually represented in spirit form, like how you would do during a dream. The striking woman saw me staring at her once again, but this time in confusion. She put her hand down and straightened herself to look at me sternly. "I guess I can tell you one more thing, my helpless, quizzical lamb," she relinquished with a sigh. "I have the preternatural ability to sense changes in the flow of time, in the flow of people's fate. It's how I knew the ambush was waiting for you in the wolf-infested cemetery." Once again I was mesmerized by her intense eyes, but I didn't turn away from her as she continued. I don't know what she was getting at, but it seemed to be important to her. The way her voice softened made it seem it was information of personal nature, or something she found hard to talk about. "I sense violence. It is the way most things transpire between monsters and mortals. I sense any potent violence that will change the path of time dramatically. We are all given free will, either to forgive or to punish one another. I can sense when God's plan is shaken and we choose to punish each other by drawing blood. This is the path we tend to choose far more often than forgiveness." Alista didn't hide her discomfort this time as her hand returned to rest above her squinting eyes, the black feathers frilling up all over her body. "Something is happening of great importance. Violence on a level that can change the world. Not since the insecure Austrian and the Great Khan have I felt this level of importance. But this room is making it foggy, and somehow amplifying it at the same time. It's like music blaring so loud you can't make out the lyrics." Alista turned away from me, her long hair swooping around her as she marched to the glowing wall. "I'm going to astral project myself outside this infernal box. I must know what's happening on the outside. I feel it has a lot to do with my son." She turned her red eyes to me. And you. Would you like to accompany me? She asked. Truth is, this room was causing me to have a headache too. Maybe it was the fact that my physical body was missing an eye and was throbbing in pain. But I wanted to follow the scary, beautiful woman anyways, so I walked to her for her to firmly take my hand into hers again. Don't let go, little lamb, she warned. Things in the astral are not always as they appear on the physical plane, and the danger is still real. If you let go of me, you may be lost in the ether forever. And this damned room is making it like we are a ship navigating during a thunderstorm. I won't lie, this terrified me, but in the end, I'm glad I took the plunge, even though what I saw scarred me ever since. I'll be back soon. What I saw needs its own chapter. Hit was pretty wild.